End of chapter 4 here of the Maimer of Hamishpatim Tafshim Aleph, or I think 4 lines from the bottom, from the end of the paragraph of chapter 4. So we're talking about Ve'ela Hamishpatim Asher Tasim Lifneim Kisikna. So we said that Tasim, that the way a teacher is supposed to teach his students is in a manner of Tasim Lifneihem, that the student needs to understand. We said Tamam Yashiv Talmudim, that you have to understand thoroughly, very well, the Torah that you're being taught. And to what extent? We said it has to be kisikna, that the person acquires it, right? It becomes yours. So, and we quoted from the Gemara, the Torah delay, right? The Torah becomes his. He takes ownership over Torah. So we said that doesn't, in the simple meaning of the pasuk, there's ve'ela hamishpatim asher tasim lifneihem. That's talking about what the job of the teacher is, the tasim lifneihem, to place before them, to teach them thoroughly. Kisikna is already a new thing. What are you going to put before them? The idea of kisikna avedivri. So, but in our understanding, our interpretation, kisikna is just sort of, he doesn't say it, but it implies almost also that it's redundant. But even if it's not redundant, it's just another explanation. That what is asher tasim lifneihem? To what extent is tasim lifneihem? They have to place before them to the extent of kisikna. Right, so it puts it together. So the Rebbe says that we can take it a step further and say no, that Asher Tasim Lifneihem is one thing, and Kisikna is a new thing. The way we in the simple understanding of the pasuk would apply even in what we're saying here, which is that it's not only that Tasim Lifneihem, which has meaning that you have to understand, you have to teach your students so they understand it so well that it becomes theirs. That's already implied and understood from Tasim Lifneihem, but it has to be Kisikna, that even after you understand it so thoroughly that it becomes yours, it has to still be in a manner of Kisikna, meaning that a person has to recognize that Torah is really an Atzilus. Right? We said Kisikna in the last class. We talked about how Kisikna, the idea of Kinyan represents Atzilus, right? The world of Atzilus. So we have like this. We have we quoted the pasuk from Tehillim, Ki b'seiras Hashem cheftzoi u'v'seirasa yega. Right? That the Torah is that he desires Torah's Havaya, the Hashem's Torah, and then u'v'seirasa yega, he is diligent in his Torah. So we quoted the Gemara is saying Torahsa yega, says Rava, that's Torah delay becomes the person's. So the simple meaning of the pasuk is Torah of Hashem. We're talking about Torah of Hashem, and a person should be diligent in whose Torah, Hashem's Torah. But the Gemara, the way the Gemara teaches it, and this is even la halacha, this is brought already in Gemara and halacha. This is not just in Agadata, it's not just a nice interpretation. But the point is that the Torah becomes the person's Torah, right? So we asked, what is the meaning here? The Torah starts as Hashem's Torah, and then it becomes the person's Torah. So what happened to Torah? It used to be on a higher level, and now it became to a lower level. Now that a person can understand it, the Torah is on a lower level, right? Or when a teacher teaches a student, so if the teacher and the student, there's a big gap between them, so the teacher, in order for the student to understand the information, the teacher has to dumb it down, basically. And so what he's giving the student is a lesser version of what he understands. So it's not that he's teaching him the wisdom, as he understands it, in his manner of understanding, but he's giving him a watered-down version of it. So is the Torah that we have a watered-down version? Is that the meaning? Obviously, it can't be the case, right? We have to say that it goes from Torah Savai to becoming the person's Torah. You're not getting a watered-down version. The Torah remains Torah as it is above. And that's what we're saying here, that Asher Tasim Lifneihem, a Yid has to understand Torah, but how can it be that a person should understand Hashem's Torah? It's the Hashem's Torah. It's beyond human intellect and comprehension. How could you understand it? So you might think you can understand it because Hashem gives us a watered-down Torah. So that's the message, Kisikna. You have to recognize that the Torah, even as you understand it, is still Atzilus. It still remains beyond your understanding, beyond your intellect. Then why? How do you understand it? It's because that's what Hashem wants, right? And we'll continue with this thought how that works. But the point is that's where we're at now. Yeah, that the person studies Torah. And he understands it in a way of Tasim Lifneihem, that he understands it so thoroughly that it becomes his. He takes ownership over the Torah. And as we discussed in the past, the significance of that in halachically even. But at the same time, he realizes that Kisikna, Torah remains Kinyan, it still remains Atzilus. It's beyond. How does a person get this? The Rebbe connects this with the Gemara, the Yerushalmi that we quoted in the beginning of the Maimer. We asked, the Yerushalmi says, Tasim Lifneihem, Tasim is Sima, that represents a hidden treasure. Right? So how does that work? We're saying Tasim Lifneihem, understand it thoroughly. The Yerushalmi says Tasim Lifneihem. On the same words, it says that it's in the mystery, the treasure, the hidden part of Torah. You give them the hidden part. The hidden part, the mystical part, is beyond intellect. So it seems to fly. It seems to contradict the other, or be incompatible with the other interpretation. So Rebbe says no. Just as you have a body and a soul, person has that even in the soul has the inner part of the soul and the outer part of the soul, and the same is true with regard to Torah. Torah has the inner dimension and the outer dimension. So it's through the inner dimension that you reveal. Through revealing the inner dimension of Torah, you reveal the inner dimension of the soul, which in turn reveals the inner dimension that even Torah, even as it's revealed, is beyond, is Torah like it's in Atzilus. Okay, that's where we concluded here, right? That's why we say in the pasuk, we say Birchas HaTorah, we say Nasan Lanu Torah Asay, right? Nasan Lanu Torah Asay. Hashem gave us His Torah, meaning Torah as it is, as it remains His. That's how it becomes ours, right? So how does that happen? So through this thing. So here the Rebbe answers one of the questions that we asked initially in the Maimer, and it ties this together. So we're 4 lines from the end of chapter 4. This is the meaning of Tasim Lefneim Kisikna. We're asked, we work towards Tasim Lefneim and Kisikna are two different things. Tasim Lefneim, place it before them, that's on the teacher. Kisikna is already talking about the student. What happens with him? Right? What's that scenario? So here we understand it, that through Tasim Melashon Sima, through a teacher teaching Limud Pnimis HaTorah, through learning the inner dimension of Torah, Nasa Agili, the Pnimis HaNeshama, that reveals the hidden part of the Neshama, the inner dimension of the Neshama, Lifneim. And here the Rebbe explains that this is Tasim Lifneim. Lifneim means Lipnimiusam, to their inner dimension, right? The Pnimius, to their inner dimension, so appeal, speak to their soul, the inner part of their soul. So through appealing to the Neshama, through Pnimis HaTorah, through that, a person senses that even in the parts of Torah that he understands thoroughly in a manner of rationale and understanding, in a manner of Tasim Lefneim, Tam HaMayashiv Talmudai, that he understands the reasoning behind it. What does he sense over there? The essence of Torah, the inner dimension of Torah, which is Torah as it's in Atzilus, the idea of Kisikna. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 4. Now, the Rebbe says, in a sense, though, it still seems somewhat incompatible. Like how does this work? What are the mechanics over here that a person should understand Torah on the one hand, understand it thoroughly? We're told you have to understand your own intellect. You have to understand it, and at the same time recognize that it's beyond your intellect. How can you have both of those components? So the Rebbe answers by saying that we've been talking now about Ve'ela Mashpatim Ashatasim Lefneim. We're talking about a teacher teaching a student how a Rav has to learn with a Talmud, right? So now the Rebbe says that this pasuk is really talking specifically to Moshe Rabbeinu, and we'll see how this helps us understand it. So he says like this: So what's the simple meaning of this pasuk of Eila Mishpatim? Is Shakadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Rabbeinu Shehu Moshe Yasem Es HaMishpatim L'Fnei Yisrael. What's the simple meaning? Is that Hashem is telling Moshe that Moshe Rabbeinu is the one who has to place these laws, teach these laws to the Yidden. And let's look at note 41. V'yashleimar. That Shashaych is the Pirush Razal Shetasim Fneim Koyal Rav Sheshein Talmidav. Im HaPirush HaPashut Shezakay Al Moshe Hu Kikol Rasha Yeshivas Shebechol Der Him B'Chinas Moshe. Here we're saying that we're talking about Moshe, and what we're about to say is specific to Moshe. So how would this fit with what we've been talking about? That is every Rav and Talmud. So the Rebbe cuts it off before we even get there. This question addresses it right here at the beginning of the paragraph of the chapter in 41. That every Rav is considered is called Moshe, right? That's what the right. So this is that every Rav is considered Moshe, and so therefore this would apply to everybody. But we find it specifically about Moshe. There's something specific about Moshe. He says like this. We asked the question in the Maimer, in the beginning, we said, these are the laws you should place before them, talking about the Yidden. And then we asked, and then it says, Kisikna, when you will acquire. So we asked, it's inconsistent, the grammar is inconsistent. We're talking to Moshe to talk to the people. And then suddenly Hashem is addressing Moshe directly, when you acquire. Why is that talking to Moshe? We said the pasuk should continue. These are the laws you should tell the people. Tell them that when they acquire an eved, but it doesn't say. It says when you will acquire. So it's inconsistent. So why is that? Which seemingly it's talking to Moshe. That's what it seems like, right? So he says like this. The Zohar says that every time we find somebody's name mentioned twice in the Torah, which we know is a big yichus, that somebody's name appears twice in the Torah, it's consecutively. So that's a sign of a great. That's a great accomplishment. So the Gemara so the Zohar says that whenever a name is mentioned twice, there's always a psik in between. There's always a pause in between the two. So even though they are consecutive words, so like he says, Kegoin Avram, right? It says by the Akedah that the Malach calls out and says Avram. So if you look if you look at the trup and the punctuation of that pasuk, there's a psik, there's a line between Avram and Avram. So even though the words are Avram, but you have to pause between Avram and Avram. There's a psik, there's a separation between the two, right? And the same is true. It says by Yaakov when Hashem calls out to Yaakov when he's going down to Mitzrayim, he says to Haran, he says, "Don't be afraid." To Mitzrayim. I'll tell you, Mitzrayim. I think he's going to Mitzrayim. It says he calls out to him and says, Yaakov. But there also there's a psik, there's a separation. Chutz mi Moshe. The lay pasuk time of Gavai. Except the exception is by Moshe, where when it says Moshe, when Moshe is called to the sneh, Hashem calls Moshe to the burning bush, and it says Moshe, and there is no. If you look at the trap over there, there is no pause between those two. What's the significance? So before Chassidus explains like this: Avram, since his neshama, when his neshama comes down to this world, nasa bashinu legabi shor Shabbat. Really, all neshamas originate in Atzilus. We know they're neshamas of Atzilus, right? But all neshamas, that's their shayrish. Most neshamas that have a shayrish already in lower worlds, right? There's the shayrish of the shayrish. But the point is that Avram's neshama is from Atzilus. But as his neshama comes into this world, it's already different than as it is in Atzilus. When you say that he's a neshama of Atzilus, what does it mean? That his neshama as it is here is as it is in Atzilus. No difference, no change. So when you have the names Avram, why is there a separation in between? The Chassidus explains what's the meaning in the Zohar. Is because Avram, the first Avram is Avram as his neshama, the shayrish of his neshama is source in Atzilus. Second Avram is Avram as he's down here. So Hashem is calling to Avram from the highest part of his soul to the lowest. Why is there a separation? Because his neshama as it's in Atzilus is different than his neshama as it's down here. It's undergone some kind of a change. But when he calls to Moshe and says, Moshe, here there's no gap. Why? Because Moshe, as he is in Atzilus and as he is down here, is the same Moshe. Doesn't change. Let's look at note 44. Yeah, it says that by Benegayat Avram Avinu, his neshama is different in Atzilus as it is down here. So he says in the heart of 44 here, Yisayrim is that furthermore, the Nishmas Avram, Kamosh Yard de Lamata, he offered ve'efer l'gabe Shor Shabbat Atzilus. The Rebbe says, not only, here inside we're saying that there's a difference. The neshama is in Atzilus in one way, and as it comes down here, it's different. So the Rebbe quotes from the Alter Rebbe, in Egeres HaKedusha, Alter Rebbe says that he quotes the Magid, the Torah of the Magid, that Avram Avinu says, Anoichi offer ve'efer. I am dust and ash, right? So we know, what is he? He's talking to Gabi Hashem. He's saying he's totally nothing, right? So the Magid interprets it and says that he's talking about his neshama as it's here in relation to his neshama as it's in Atzilus, in its source. That as he's in Atzilus, the Ava that he has for the Eibishter is the Atzilus level Ava. But the way he feels, his feeling down here is like ash and dust compared to as it is in his source. Meaning, it's not just that it's different; it's like nothingness. It can't be compared at all. There's no comparison. Alter Rebbe gives a whole lengthy explanation there in the letter about what does it mean. He says offer ve'efer, so we know everything's made up of 4 yesodis, right? Everything's made up of 4 elements. So there's eish, mayim, ruach, and offer, fire, air, water, and dust, right? The 4 elements that comprise everything. So what happens when you take a tree, let's say take a branch that's made up of all 4 elements, and then you burn it in a fire. So the fire, what it does is it removes 3 of the elements, and what are you left with? Just the element of dust, as it turns into ash. That's ash. That's what you have. So the Alter Rebbe says, so could you compare a heap of ash? So the ash is the tree. That's what it is, right? It comes from the tree. It's the tree itself. And yet, could you compare it to the beautiful, tree that's producing beautiful fruit? Obviously, you can't get no comparison. That's what Avram Avinu is saying. That the distance, the gap, the transformation of his neshama from the way it's in its source, the way it is here, is offer ve'efer. Right? And yet by Moshe we say that there's no change at all. So what's the reason for this? How is it that Moshe's neshama could be in Atzilus and could be down here in the same way? So he explains because the source of Moshe's neshama is from Igulim, the level of Igulim which is higher than Ishtalshlus. Igulim, we know that they're different, without getting too mystical, but basically there's a level of Igulim. Beyond the Ishtalshlus, you have what's called Igulim, which means literally circles. Why is it called Igulim, circles? Because just as a circle has no beginning and no end, right? So the same is true with that level of Igulim, is that it's such a place where there's no beginning, there's no end. It's totally infinite. It's beyond any kind of structure. Right? Structure, there's a beginning, there's an end, there's a top, there's a bottom, there's higher, there's lower. This is beyond any of that kind of definition. So since that's where Moshe's neshama comes from, and since when we're talking about higher than Ishtalshlus, Atzilus and beyond and lower are the same. So we know from when we're talking in Ishtalshlus, there's a whole hierarchy, there's a whole evolution that takes place. There's higher, there's Atzilus, which it can't compare. Atzilus is fundamentally separate and different. The Richuk Erech is tremendous between Atzilus and Bria and what comes afterwards. And yet, if you're talking about higher than Atzilus, so here Atzilus and beyond and lower are the same. There's no difference, right? It's Ein Arich. There's no comparison. So therefore, when we're talking about, since Moshe Neshama is from Igulim, meaning from beyond Atzilus, higher than Atzilus, so with regard to that level, from that in that space, Atzilus and lower than Atzilus are the same. It doesn't matter if it's higher or lower. It's like we're talking about Torah. So if we're talking about Torah as it's in Atzilus, so as Torah is in Atzilus, it has to be higher than it is down here, right? We're going to come back to this point soon, and we've been talking about it already. This idea that Torah as it's Lamaila is higher than Torah as it's down here. So it would follow that Torah as it's in Atzilus is on one level, and as it comes down here is on a lower level, right? And yet we said that the Torah down here, we have to recognize it's the same Torah as in Atzilus. How is that possible? Seemingly, it's coming lower, right? So you would think, simple understanding is before Matan Torah, there's a Torah was beyond. Torah is beyond human comprehension. What happens in Matan Torah? Hashem lowers the Torah down, and lowers it down and makes it palatable and understandable even to human intellect. So now what happened to Torah? It was lowered, right? It was now lowered to come into human intellect. So the word here we're trying to say is that it's not, even as Torah comes down here, it still remains Torah that's beyond intellect. It's the same Torah, it doesn't change. And why is that? Because its source is higher than it. And the same is true. That's why this pasuk, this instruction is to Moshe, because Moshe embodies this idea of being higher, and that higher and lower are the same. That it could be higher, it could be lower, and it's exactly the same. It doesn't change. Why? Because his source is beyond any of that. So just as we've been explaining, that like we quoted from Makam Arin and Amida, we'll get back to soon, and the idea that you introduce something that's higher than high and low, and so therefore it could be the same in both places, right? So Torah, even since Torah is higher than even Torah Savaya, so therefore it could be Torah Savaya, it could be Torah of the person, and it's the same Torah, it doesn't change.
So how do
right?
we understand it?
Shem allows us to understand it, but it remains higher. So we'll continue to explore that point soon. So V'zeh Shalom Moshe Nemar Asher Taslim Lefneim Kisikne Ki Achibur De Beis Hadarge Shebetoyra Kamoshe Neslap Shebeseichel Adam Taslim Lefneim O Kamoshe Yisrael Raschab Shabbat Tzilas Kinyin While Yidei Hagilui De Lamayla Mishtal Shashim Shach Yidei Moshe. Moshe embodies this idea of higher than Ishtalshalos in Ishtalshalos, higher than even Atzilus. Moshe represents a level, just as we said about Hashem. Now, Hashem is not limited. When you say you have Torah, we understand it is finite, but Torah is also infinite. You can limit something to infinity, you can limit something to finitude. You can correct me, Nachman. That works, right? Just as something is limited to Gvul, it could be limited to Bli Gvul. Right? So Torah, as it's believable, as it's infinite, can't come into human intellect. Human intellect can't grasp it. Human intellect, as it grasps Torah, that's limited. It can't be compared to Torah as it's beyond it. So since we're saying that the Eibusher is beyond any definition, beyond any limitation, even the limitation of infinite, so therefore it could be infinite and finite, and it's the same thing. And who embodies this? Moshe Rabbeinu. Because the Mayin Nafkamina. That's what we're saying. If it's infinite, then it can't come into finite human intellect. If it's finite, then it's lower. Then it's a different, in a sense, a different Torah. So when we're saying that it's neither, it's not it can't be defined as either. So therefore, when we study Torah, we're studying Hashem's Torah as it's Hashem's Torah, completely unfiltered. Not just the way we study. We'll get to how we study it soon, but that it's Torah is Hashem b'tarasa, pure as it is l'mayla. It's not. We're not studying a watered down version of Torah.
It's not distilled. We're studying the.
Okay, so that's why we asked, why is he saying kisikna in the singular and direct, when if we're talking it should say kiyiknu, right, to be consistent. So that's the whole. So that the answer is here, because how is it possible that a yid should be able to take on the one hand Hashem's Torah, that and it's Tasim Lifneim, he understands it thoroughly, that he takes ownership over it. Torah delay, the Gemara says it's his Torah, the person's Torah. And at the same time, Kisikna, the Torah, he still recognizes the Torah Atzilus is beyond him. How do you have these two opposites? They seem to be opposites, right? It seems to be a contradiction. So the answer is Kisikna, you, to Moshe. Since you embody this idea of being higher and lower at the same place, Moshe, lepasik taime begavayu, Moshe as he's in Atzilus is the same Moshe as he's Lamata, the unique to Moshe. And why? Because he comes from higher than even Atzilus. It comes from Shreish and Negulim, to put it in Kabbalistic terms, meaning that Moshe's neshama comes from that place that's beyond even being defined as infinite. Therefore, he could be higher and lower the same. That's how a Yid gets the koyach to study Torah in that way. That on the one hand, it's Tasim Lifneim, he understands it thoroughly, becomes his. He understands it thoroughly in his intellect, and at the same time, he recognizes Kisikna Torah as it's in Atzilus, it's beyond.
Yeah, everything is very good. That is very, very to understand that.
Right. We started. We're building on what we've been explaining, but we'll explain a little bit more soon. Okay.
So sickness gets to Moshe.
Right. So Taka gets so it's on both. Now you get how it's both, but it's a lot geshmaker. That it's kisikna taka. We're talking the Yidden is kisikna. Yid studies Torah in a manner of kisikna that he recognizes that. But why? Because Moshe. The koyach comes from Moshe. Moshe is the one who reveals this aspect. Moshe is bar le'il siv gimel shachibur the teras shel adam im teras havaya haydei gilei insef. It's just as we said before. How is it possible to have these two things of Torah of the person and at the same time it's Torah say of the person at the same time it's teras havaya of Hashem? It's because you're megal the shirish of Torah as it's an erin seif applicable beyond any of these levels. And by introducing that higher level where it's beyond all of it, so there you could have Maila, Mata, all of that is equal. Yep? Okay. So now, so very nice. So we have a nice interpretation of Eila Mishpatim Ashatasim Lefneim Kisikna. Right? And so we first explained, as we said at the beginning here, a little review, that we first explained the Eila Mishpatim Ashatasim Lefneim Kisikna, that Ashatasim Lefneim and Kisikna are the same, essentially. Kisikna is an explanation of the extent to which Tasim Lefneim, right? Then we said that's not enough because Kisikna is really a new thing. It's a new pasuk and it's a new Inyan. So we have to say that. So the Rebbe goes on to explain that Tasim Lefneim is the manner. You have to understand it thoroughly. And then Kisikna, even after understanding, even after Tasim Lefneim, has to be Kisikna. You have to recognize Torah Savaya, that it's beyond its Atzilus. And then we discussed that, and that answers both the Yerushalmi, why Tasim Lefneim is Sima, what the connection with that is, and also with the idea that the Kisikna is in the singular, how it has to do with Moshe. We tied all that together very nicely. And so we have a very nice drush. But in the pasuk, it's not just that Kisikna is a new thing in relation to Asher Tasim Lefneim. Kisikna doesn't apply to Tasim Lefneim. It applies to what's following after. Kisikna Avedivri. So how does that work? So now the Rebbe is going to explain how that works with the simple meaning that Kisikna is talking about Avedivri. Yep.
You stop after Kisikne, or you say Beira Mishkutim, or you say Mem Kisikne, and why did he bring now Kisikne every after?
Oh, we'll get there. Yeah, we're going to get there. We're working towards that. So now, what we said till now explains Ashatasim the frame Kisikna. But that's not the literal meaning of the verse. The literal meaning is Tasim the frame Kisikna Avedivri. So that's not understand. So that's chapter 6. Let's go. V'hinei mishpirush anal b'kisikna shekoyal shetasim lefneim yesh lekashim apirush apashat kisikna koyal achrize kisikna eved. Yeah. So we can connect this with the simple meaning that kisikna is referring to acquiring a servant. So now that we understand that when a person studies Torah in a manner of kisikna, which we know, what's kisikna mean? That that he feels that the Torah that he's learning is not his human Torah that he understands in his limited to his human intellect, but that it's the Torah of Hashem that's higher. Then his studying is with complete bittul, complete submission and surrender.
What is the Havamina to stop after Kisikne? You say always the take Kisikne. There is a Havamina to stop after Kisikne.
No. Correct. That's what we're saying. That's what we're explaining.
Question on the pasuk, and then original question.
Does Akmenu? That's what we're talking about. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about now. Right. Yeah. So bedugmas bitol ha'eved la'adin. That when a person studies Torah in a way that kisikna becomes that he recognizes that it's Torah Savaya. So then what happens? His study is with bittul. In other words, we're talking about which we have to understand. What does this mean? Because the whole point is we study Torah. You have to understand Torah. You have to understand it. When you understand something, the difference between a student and a teacher and a servant and a master, what's the difference? If a teacher is teaching a student, the student doesn't understand what he's saying. Could you call him a student? Could you say he's teaching him anything? He's not teaching him anything. There's no relationship here at all, right? Whereas by a master and a servant, it doesn't matter what the reason behind it, whether the servant appreciates or understands what the master wants or not. No, he just has to do what he wants. So they seem incompatible. So we're talking about kisikna, we're talking about learning Torah, understanding it thoroughly, that you can understand it. Isn't that incompatible with the idea of Eved? They seem to be two opposites. You tell me, now you're saying that if we're talking about learning Torah, and I have to understand it, so how's kisikna Eved? That it has to be Avodas Eved? How does that work? Eved means that it's not, my understanding is irrelevant. It's not a matter of understanding. But understanding is a student-teacher, that's not Eved. So how does that work? So he says, when we study Torah in a manner of recognizing that even after we understand it, what are we understanding? Pure, unfiltered Torah Savaya, the Eibusher's Torah, as it is beyond intellect. So what does that cause? What kind of feeling does that cause in the person? Total nullification. Why? Even though when a person studies Torah, the function of studying Torah is that you don't study a pasuk in the Chumash, or you study a Blat Gemara, and you learn a Maimer in the Gemara, and you say, yep, I believe with the Munah B'Shlema that what the Gemara is saying is true. If you believe it, then you're not learning it. You have to understand it. You have to understand. So, right, you have to understand it with your intellect. This has to do with your own existence. Especially if we're talking about that, it's not just that you understand the Torah, but it becomes Torah. We call it your Torah. Remember, we quoted from the Chidah, right? The halacha, that a person, a Rav that's Meichel al Kvaydei, right, is Kvaydei Machel. So he says, only when you understand the reason behind it. In other words, I can learn Torah, I can be a big Talmud Chacham and know things in Torah. It's still not called Torah Sai. It's still not, you don't take ownership of it. When do you take ownership? When you understand it really well. When you even understand the reasoning behind it. So not just understand the meaning of the words, but you understand it thoroughly. Then it becomes yours. So that's even more the person. And he has now the ownership over Torah, right?
Excuse me for a minute. So what are you going to do with Kichol Asher Yerucha if you say that you have to understand it?
This is a different question. Let's afterwards. I'll answer that afterwards. That's a good question. Nevertheless, when a person, when he studies Torah, he senses that the Torah is Torah Savaya. It's not that it goes from being Torah Savaya on a higher level. Now it comes to Torah, so it comes to a lower level. But that it remains Torah Savaya. There's intellect that's beyond the creation's capacity and intellect. Answering your question, Nachman, how is it that it could be higher than intellect and yet we understand it? It's because Hashem is not limited to any limitation. Yeah? So therefore, it could be beyond understanding and you can understand it all at the same time because he's not limited to any of that.
Understand her is a crazy thing that doesn't make sense
and it reveals the depth of it. That's what we explained before. Remember, we said when a Torah becomes a person's Torah, that enhances Torah itself as well. Why? How could it be l'chayr? If a person can understand Torah, it means it's not such a great, intelligent thing. If it was really something deep, then profound, then we shouldn't be able to understand it. If we understand it, how profound could it be? So we say, Adrabah, the fact that we can understand Hashem's Torah shows how profound it is, that it's not limited to remaining profound. Right? So that's the whole part. So how do we understand Torah? Because Hashem is not bound by any of these limitations. That the human intellect that's limited should be able to grasp and comprehend God's intellect that's beyond limit. So if that's the case, so then a person understanding is not a contradiction to bittul. If a person understands Torah because he's smart, if we understand, we say like this: Torah is Taka Hashem's Torah. It's beyond intellect, right? It's beyond human understanding. Then what happens? Hashem gives us the Torah, mountain Torah. He takes the Torah and he gives us like a small version of Torah that we can now understand. So now I'm studying human, comprehensible Torah. Right? I'm a very smart guy, very talented, and very diligent, a big masmid. I sit and learn Yom V'Layla and Koil. And so therefore, now I understand the Torah. If that's the case, the more I understand, the bigger Baal Gaiva I become. the more of a Metzias I become, because I'm understanding what I can understand. And since I'm so intelligent, I can understand very intelligent things. But if we're saying, so that's one way of understanding Taka, it's Nebach. But if you recognize that when Hashem gives us Torah, it's not that He gave us a watered-down version of Torah, but it's the Torah as it's beyond intellect, was given to a human being. And how's that possible? Because Hashem is not limited. So therefore you can't limit Torah as Hashem to infinity. So then how could a human being understand Torah? Not because he's smart. He understands Torah because Hashem is Kol Yachol. The fact that a Yid understands Torah is not because he's capable of understanding. He understands Torah because Hashem is not limited. So then, with the more Torah you understand, what do you feel? Your own Metzias, your own intellect. The more you sense the greatness of Hashem. Which, the more you can appreciate the greatness of Hashem, the smaller you become. The greater the bittul. So that's how we see, that's how we connect these two things. That there's, on one hand, understand it thoroughly, and what happens? Kisikna Eved. That you study Torah and you remain an Eved of Hashem. Right? The Yid understands Torah. At the end of the day, you say Krishma at night, you lay down, you go to bed, and you think, today I studied a Geshmak, a Blat Gemara, I understood it very thoroughly. Why? It must be because I'm very smart. Right? My mind, and now I'm, no. The reason is because he asked Hashem to enlighten you with His Torah. You understand because He enables you to understand it. Why? Not because you're some great anything, but because He's beyond definition, beyond limitation. And so therefore, what do you feel at the end? You feel that ultimate bittul to Hashem. Okay, let's look at note 46 here. Yeah, we said inside that the fact that a Yid could understand Torah is not because he understands it, not because both he is intelligent and because the Torah was brought down to a level that is intelligible in the human intellect, but because the Eibusher is not bound and not limited to even to infinity. Yeah. So he says we talked about this in the previous class as well. Let's look at note 46. This idea is illustrated in the concept of the Makim Ha'aron Eina Min Amida, with the Gemara in Yuma, that the Aron hu Inyan HaTorah. Aron, the Ark of the Covenant that stood in the Holy of Holies in the temple, that represents Torah. And the fact that a person can understand Torah, Aron symbolizes Torah. And the fact that a person can understand Torah is similar to this idea that the Aron was Eina Min Amida, that it was time and that it was space and beyond space coexisted together. Why is that? Because mitzad zeh he's baruch kol yachol v'nimram norois. There's no way to explain to rationalize or to explain the concept that the Aron on one hand had definition, had borders, had a measurement, and at the same time took up no space. They're incompatible. Space and non-space are incompatible. They can't coexist. And yet that's exactly what happens in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Aron had definition, had a measurement, and yet it didn't take up any space in the room. So it's a physical box in a physical room with dimensions, and yet it doesn't take up any space. So how is that? Because we're introducing here it's not the level of infinity. It can't fit into finite. You can't fit infinity into finite space. What happens then when infinity and finite come together? What happens is we recognize that there's a level that's beyond even infinity. One in which infinity and finite are the same. They're neither one. So that is expressed in the Aron. And that's exactly what happens. Why? In other words, it's almost like Rebbe is saying over here in the note, I think, if you want to read between the lines in a sense, why do we find this miracle by the Aron? What's the purpose of this miracle, the significance of this miracle? Rebbe is saying, because the Aron, Makam Armein Amida, basically it symbolizes what happens when a Yid studies Torah. When a Yid studies Torah, it's Nimna Noise, it's Makam Aron Eina Min Amida. I'm sorry?
So you put the note of it.
Yeah, right. So that's it's not just a hasbar. He's not just giving like kilo arayah to explain it. It's saying this is the whole idea. When a Yid understands Torah, it's the impossible happening. So what happens when a person is mindful of this when he studies Torah? What happens as a result? What's the result? He becomes a bigger mitzias. He becomes non-mitzias. He becomes more bittul. There's more bittul to the Eibishter. So in a sense, paradoxically, you could say maybe, the more a person recognizes the greatness of Torah that he himself understands, the smaller he becomes. The bigger a person becomes from learning Torah, the bigger Balgaiva you become from learning Torah, it means that you have a very limited, it's not real Torah. It's not Torah, it's a very limited thing. So you could have been great, a very, very big scientist, you became a big professor of Jewish law. But when we say if it's taka, the true greatness of Torah, so that causes the opposite result. That causes a person to be smaller because he recognizes that the ability he has to understand Torah is only from the Eibishter that can do the impossible. Right? Where finite and infinite come together. How are we doing on time? Can we continue? No? We're done?